weep and mourn. Jesus said those who mourn now will rejoice later, and those who rejoice now will mourn later. And what Jesus said, and Jesus is weeping and Jesus is rejoicing himself, is all prophetic foreshadow of the end times. Luke chapter 6 verse 26 says, "Woe unto you that are full, for you shall hunger. Woe unto you that laugh now, for you shall mourn and weep." Now this is a prophetic term for what is to come. With both the resurrection and the sacking of the beast at the temple, Jesus wept over the dead and will rejoice later. We see this in John chapter 11, verse 23 and 24 says, "Jesus saith unto her, Thy brother shall rise again. Martha said unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day." There's a prophetic turn for what is occurring in the weeping and the mourning and the rejoicing over the temple sacking and over the dead. And there is a prophetic timeline of Christ during his time and the time of the end, and there will be a rejoicing and a mourning, and there will be a mourning and a rejoicing in the end. And this is what this is talking about here. "Jesus saith unto her, Thy brother shall rise again. Martha said unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day." The context here is about the weeping over the dead and the resurrection. In John chapter 11, verse 33 through 36, it says, "When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping, which came with her, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled, and said, Where have you laid him? They said unto him, Lord, come and see. And Jesus wept. Then said the Jews, Behold how he loved him." Well, when we look to the resurrection, the real reason for the weeping is because of their unbelief, and there'll be a rejoicing in the resurrection in the end. But the people are weeping over the dead now, but they'll be rejoicing later. John chapter 11, verse 43 and 44 says, "And when he thus had spoken, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he that was dead came forth, bound, hand and foot, with grave cloth, and his face was bound with a napkin. Jesus saith unto him, Loose him, and let him go." Now this is with the resurrection then at the time of Lazarus. The people were weeping and crying. Now let's talk about the resurrection later. Revelation chapter 19, verse 7 says, "Let us be glad and rejoice, and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife has made herself ready." So we see that there's a rejoicing later, which is at the wedding when the people are given the marriage and the wedding garments, and that's at the resurrection. They're clothed in white from the resurrected bodies and their garments. Revelation chapter 19, verse 8 talks about that. It says in it, "And to her was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, for the fine linen is the righteousness of the saints." Now let's look over the sacking of the temple then, during that time. Looking to Jesus here and what occurs at the temple, and knowing that the temple will be sacked, Luke chapter 19, verse 41 through 44 says, "And when he was come near, he beheld the city and wept over it, saying, If thou hadst known, even thou, at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thy peace, but now they are hid from thine eyes. For the days shall come upon thee, that thine enemies shall cast a trench about thee, and compass thee around, and keep thee in on every side, and shall lay thee even with the ground, and thy children within thee, and they shall not leave in thee one stone upon another, because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation." He begins to reference about the casting of the money changers in the temple, and the people being sacked. Luke chapter 19, verse 45 and 46. "And he went into the temple and began to cast out them that sold therein, and them that bought, saying unto them, It is written, My house is a house of prayer, but ye have made it a den of thieves." So at that time there was a mourning, sadness over what was to occur. But later there's going to be a gladness. There's going to be a rejoicing when the beast sacks Jerusalem. Revelation chapter 18, verse 19 and 20. "And they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness, for in 1 hour she is made desolate. Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her." So we see there's a rejoicing over the sacking of Jerusalem later. So we see that there's a rejoicing of the resurrection and the sacking of the Jerusalem that came later. And the world will rejoice at the killing of the prophets. They will be glad at that point. But later it will be turned into mourning. Revelation chapter 11, verse 10. And they that dwell upon the earth shall rejoice over them, and make merry, and shall send gifts one to another, because these two prophets tormented them that dwell on the earth. Their rejoicing will not last long. They will have but a short moment until the sky turns black. And they will turn their rejoicing and their little party into weeping and mourning until that day of the Lord appears, and all the earth will mourn. Matthew chapter 24, verse 30 says, And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn. And they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So we see first in Revelation chapter 11, verse 10, that all the earth is rejoicing and having a great time, merry that they've killed two prophets, until just a few days later, it's turned into mourning as they see Christ coming to bring and execute wrath and judgment. Their rejoicing and their gladness will be turned to mourning. And the mourning that the people were having at that time will be turned to gladness at the resurrection. Revelation chapter 1 says, Behold, he cometh with clouds, and every eye shall see him, and they also which pierced him, and all kindreds of the earth shall wail because of him. Even so, amen. All the things that Christ had done in the earth as he walked the earth are all prophetic. The entire gospel, the entire New Testament, all the stories, and the stories in the Old Testament are all prophecy. When Christ walked the earth and he explained things, he was explaining things not only just to them then, but also what was to come. He was talking about their mourning then with the dead would turn into rejoicing later. And the people who are rejoicing over those who are being killed will actually be mourning later. And this is all a prophetic fulfillment of what the Scriptures say, that the Spirit of Christ is the Spirit of prophecy. Revelation chapter 19, verse 10 says, And I fell at his feet to worship him, and he said unto me, See thou do it not. I am thy fellow servant and of thy brethren that have the testimony of Jesus. Worship God, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. The testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. The death, burial, and resurrection of what occurred then will occur in the latter times. The people that were mourning over the Lord at that point would rejoice when he was resurrected. And the same likeness in the end times will occur. That the mourning will be turned to rejoicing, and the rejoicing will be turned to mourning. And this is the prophecy of the mourning of the earth.